So today is the final week in our worship series called The Way of a Disciple, in which we have been exploring what it means to follow the way of Jesus. We've explored how discipleship is a lifelong journey in which we commit to taking steps toward Jesus in a variety of ways. We've looked at what it means to be in Christian community. True discipleship is not just about believing, it is also about belonging. As we seek to become true disciples of Jesus, we are also called to mature in our faith. And so as we pray and fast and worship, as we serve and give and study, we are molded into the shape of Christ. We become disciples as we unify in the body of Christ. We've been considering how the way of a disciple involves a lifelong process in which we become and we belong. And today we are going to look at what it means to bless. I think if we look at the way of a disciple, the passage from Matthew today gives us the answers to a couple of questions. Who are we, and what are we to do? To start out with, we are the salt of the earth. So what on earth does that mean? It's maybe difficult for us to completely grasp the concept here because, what is the big deal about salt? We live in a world where salt is so commonplace. There's a salt shaker on nearly every table. Salt is so commonplace and frankly overused that we've begun to even think of salt as a little bit dangerous. Many people are on low-sodium diets, and they limit their salt intake because too much sodium causes hypertension. So when Jesus is talking salt, I don't think that he's talking about the qualities that cause hypertension. So we can get that off the table right to start out with. Salt just seems so ordinary, so run-of-the-mill. I don't know that if we ever really stop to think about the value of salt. Salt is essential, and in the ancient world, salt was quite valuable. Salt is a preservative, and before refrigeration, salt was essential for preserving food. Have you ever heard the expression, he's not worth his salt? Do you know that this actually stems from the fact that Greek slave traders would barter salt for slaves? Salt was viewed as more valuable than some people. Salt was also used to purchase the freedom of slaves, which I think is interesting when we think about being the salt of the earth. Perhaps we are to share the gospel in ways that set captives free. Did you know that the word salary is derived from a Latin word which means a soldier's allowance for the purchase of salt? And so how about spilling salt? I remember when I was a kid, if my grandma, if she spilled a little bit of salt, she would take a pinch of it and she'd toss it over her left shoulder. For the superstitious, spilling salt is really kind of a bad omen, and they would toss a little bit over their shoulder to try to ward off bad luck. Salt was a little tiny thing of great value, and spilling salt was kind of like throwing away money. If you look closely at the Last Supper painting by Leonardo da Vinci, Judas is the one that's portrayed with his elbow on the table. I think Miss Manners could have spotted this guy from a long ways away. But he has his elbow on the table, and he's shown knocking over a bowl of salt. This could be in reference to an ancient Near Eastern expression, to betray the salt, which means to betray one's master. And as we know, Judas had betrayed his master for 30 pieces of silver. Biblically, salt is a sign of a covenant. Until Vatican II, a small little taste of salt was placed on a baby's lips during baptism to represent purification and as that child entered into a covenant with God. In the ancient world, eating salt together was a way of making an agreement legally binding. So if two people were negotiating on something and they came to an agreement, they would eat salt in each other's presence, and that would be the sign that their contract was binding. Salt is a sign of keeping promises. In Matthew 5, the verses that come just before the passage that we read today are the Beatitudes. And these Beatitudes say a lot of things about blessing. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So Jesus proclaims all of these blessings, and then the next thing he says is, you are the salt of the earth. And so I had kind of a light bulb moment today as I was thinking about salt being the idea of keeping promises. As the salt of the earth, we are the sign that God keeps God's promises. We are the keepers of God's promises, the promises that he made to bless those who are poor in spirit, and those who mourn, and those who hunger and thirst, the peacemakers, and those who are persecuted. As the salt of the earth, we are to make good on this blessing by serving the poor, by comforting those who mourn, by feeding the hungry, by working for peace alongside of the peacemakers. When Jesus tells the disciples that they are the salt of the earth, he specifically mentions the qualities of salt's flavor, the role that they play in enhancing the flavor of food. Salt, when added in just the right amount, enhances the flavors of all the other ingredients in the recipe. Have you ever forgotten the salt when baking something? It does not taste good. It's crazy how like a quarter teaspoon of something can completely ruin a good batch of cookies. A little bit of salt goes a long way, and it brings out the flavors of the other ingredients. Now, pepper. If you add pepper to things, all it does is get more peppery. But salt makes the other flavors become more of themselves. Jesus did not call us to be the pepper of the world. We are not the pepper of the world, called to make people taste more like ourselves. No, we are the salt of the earth. And this is because we are to help other people to live into who they are each uniquely created to be. Recall how last week we discovered that while unity is valued, uniformity is not the way that we are to achieve it. As the salt of the earth, we allow each other to be uniquely ourselves with all of our differences as we unify in love, and we all together become more of who we are than we would be alone. So if we are the salt of the earth and our flavor-enhancing abilities are what is really valued about us, then we are called to add flavor, to enhance and enliven the flavors of others, to make the world more delicious, more savory, and more beautiful. Wow, that is awesome. To do this, we are to participate in the blessing that Jesus had just laid out in the Beatitudes. As we participate in the world in this way, we are able to elicit the goodness that brings about this blessing. So now Jesus also points out the danger of what happens if we forget our capacity for eliciting the blessings. If we forget that we are called to turn the status quo on its head by valuing those who are dispossessed, by caring for those who suffer loss, by seeking justice and showing mercy, by having integrity and being peacemakers, then we have become salt that has lost its flavor. And that does not do the world a whole lot of good. If salt has lost its flavor, it ain't got much in its favor. We are the salt of the earth. And then Jesus goes on from there to say, we are the light of the world. Followers of Jesus are to be a bright light and to bring that light into a dark and hurting world. This light is gospel love. Now, sometimes when we shine the light of the gospel into the world, it looks like us sharing our faith with other people. But sharing this light of the gospel in the world often looks like providing food for the hungry and showing mercy and kindness to a stranger. It looks a lot like weeping with those who mourn. It looks a lot like standing in solidarity with those who are oppressed and being the voice for those who have been silenced. You are the light of the world. You are not meant to be hidden. Hide it under a bushel? I don't think so. You were made to shine, not for your own glory or for your own recognition, but to point everyone in the direction of God's glory. If we were to take seriously our job of being light for a hurting world, what would that look like? How would that shape the way that we plan our days? How would that change what we do and how we go about doing it? When you do good works, don't do good works just to make yourself look good or to enhance your status. Do good works because that is exactly what you were created to do. Doing good works is the same as being who you really are. It's not about gaining stature. It's about living into who you already are. Maturing as disciples and unifying as the church, we are to grow to the measure of the full stature of Christ. There are all kinds of ways that we can do good works to bless people. When you visit someone who is sick or lonely, when you offer a ride to someone who hasn't been able to get out for a while, when you provide a meal for someone, you are being a disciple and who blesses others with your kindness. We have members of our congregation who volunteer with Make-A-Wish Foundation, and they are sharing the light of Christ by bringing joy to families who have children that have been facing serious health challenges. Just last week, we had a group who served a simple supper for the clients of Caring Hands Food Pantry. Every time we bring items for the food pantry or the winter clothing drive, every time we give to Heifer or to UMCOR or to any of our special offerings that we collect through the United Methodist Church, we let the light of Christ shine through us. When we let the light of Christ shine for the glory of God, we bless others with warmth and with goodness, and that is magnetic. That draws people in. Now, in order for the light to be seen, we must be willing to go into the dark every once in a while, to engage and walk through it, so that in time, the light of the gospel love that we bring with us will overcome the darkness. Like the video that Jonathan referenced is very powerful. And the people in this video come into church, and while they're in church, they start to glow. Their light gets filled up. And then what if church looked like this, is people getting all filled up with the light and then going. And they interact with people. And as they care for people, and as they love other people, that light that they have inside of them is shared, and it passes on. And all of a sudden, we have this network of light. We as Christians are not given this light. We are not blessed with this light to keep it to ourselves. We are not blessed with this light to keep it tucked safely inside of the walls of our church. It is a blessing that is meant to bless others. Annie Dillard has written, "You don't have to sit outside in the dark. If, however, you want to look at the stars, you will find darkness is necessary." If we want to be the light of the world, we are going to have to venture into those dark places, carrying the light of Christ with us. As children of God, we are blessed to be a blessing. The word bless can be defined as to say or do something good for another. Archbishop William Temple is quoted as saying, "The church is the only organization on earth that exists for those who are not its members." I like that. And I think sometimes that's easy to forget, but I think that it is very powerful. The church, the very point of our existence, is not merely to be here. It's not merely to exist. It's not merely a social club where we get together and we see our friends once a week. Our entire reason for existing is to bless others and shine the light of Christ into the world. We are the salt of the earth. We are the light of the world. We are salt and we are light so that we can share that flavor and illumination with the world. We can brighten dark corners and season the world deliciously. In his Sermon on the Mount, Jesus was teaching that people are blessed by anything that draws them closer to God. And this, as we draw to the close of our series about discipleship, this, drawing closer to God, is exactly what discipleship is about. Growing closer to God with each and every passing day, and with the light of Christ helping other people to do that also. We are salt and light for others. And when we are salt and we are light, we love God and we love our neighbor. Jesus said that sums up the entire law and the prophets. Love God and love your neighbor. This is exactly what we have been blessed and tasked to be. Let it be so.